So the idea, very simply, as I tried to explain this morning, is to get a sense of what this community was like when you came in 1958, in terms of, the synagogue structure, in terms of what kinds of work people did, in terms of the sociology of the community, of which I think you know more than most. I mean, you have a very good way of getting a sense of what this place was like. So if you just start to talk about what it was like. I mean, you came with your wife in 1958. You probably weren't in your late 50s by then.
No, not really.
But what was it like? Because I told you this morning, I think you once told me that at least for the first little while, some, if not many, of your drushes were in fact in Yiddish. So there must have been people who understood, whereas, if you were to Megillah Drush on Shabbos in Yiddish, I mean, people would look around saying, what's he talking about? So
they think it's very profound. Well, let me just describe the mood that I encountered when I first came to Hamilton. That was Parshas Baaloscha in 1958. It was June, around June time. And this was the parsha of the mitzvah of kindling and lighting the menorah. And therefore, coming to Hamilton, I felt very inspired by the parsha. So I arrived on Friday, and I stayed Shabbos on top of the auto part business. There was a little apartment there on Cannon and Bay, and there was a chazan who lived there. And they scheduled an Onik Shabbat. So of course we had a regular minyan at the proper time, and after the minyan we had an Onik Shabbat. And therefore I discussed in my address the Ramban and all the ramifications of lighting a menorah and how it relates to the general community and the Jewish community throughout the world. And at the end of that address, one of the important Balabatim raised his hand up to say, oh, this is not something that we can relate to. I just came out of the yeshiva, being a Talmud of Rav Soloveitchik, sitting literally at his feet for 4 years, and even previously to that, attending all his lectures. So I was quite high in terms of information, and therefore I felt that if I'm to make a real impression, I have to tell them Rambams, Bimbams, whatever it was, that these people would be very impressed. So obviously, Friday night did not go over too well. So Shabbos morning, I gave a sermon, once again in English, not knowing the mixture of the congregation. And once again, one of the important Balabatim took me for a walk in the market. There was a market on James Street, and he says, Rabbi, it seems that you've learned a lot of Torah, but we in this community, you have to know how to relate to these people. And it seems that what you said may have relevance, but it did not have much relevance to us. So I recognized that, and I felt a sense of relief. Therefore, when it came to Mincha time, we had a Shalosh Shudas at Mincha time. Well, I should describe, first of all, the type of people that arrived Friday night. Friday night, we had a very large constituency of the Beth Jacob, because the Hoffman family was well acquainted and had most of their friends who were members of the Beth Jacob. So the younger group came to the shul on Friday night. And Shabbos morning, once again, their friends, but less, was a smaller congregation. But those were the so-called Pnei of the Jewish community of Hamilton. And I didn't really know who were the members, who were not members. And then when it came to Shalosh Shudas, Mincha time, then we had only about 15 people. And these were the peddlers who spoke only in Yiddish and the Shochet. And therefore, I felt very comfortable and I gave a shiur. And since the shochet was sitting there, so I gave a halacha shiur on Hilchis Shrita. Just because he was already in his late 70s, and here I was 24. So I felt, if we are going to relate as my shochet, he must know that I know something about Shrita and the various halachas. So at the end of that, he said to a few of the peddlers, "Dos heist darauf." This is a rabbi. And I called Sylvia that night, and I said, "Sylvia, you can relax. We're not going to Hamilton." They haven't accepted me. So that's fine, and I feel good about it. And Sunday morning, there's a breakfast. This is all on Cannon Street Shul, and that is their hall in the basement. And there, person gets up, I think he weighed about 300 pounds, and he said, "Rabbi," and he had a certain, there was an inflection of it in his talk, and he says, "We need in Hamilton more than a rabbi. If we are going to succeed, we must eliminate and he didn't have the word for what a mechitza was, but men and women have to sit together. It's the only way that we can compete." So the whole question was comical in my eyes, and this is how I responded to him. I said, "Well, how many people come to the synagogue Saturday morning at the temple?" He says, "They're closed Saturday morning." I said, "Well, how many people come to the conservative Saturday morning?" He says, "Well, not too many." So the fellow told me his name is Hotz. I said, "Mr. Hotz, do you expect me to come to this congregation and compete with a bunch of losers? We're marketing religion. And if no one is buying reform or conservative, what am I doing here?" He says, "That's the man we need." So suddenly the whole mood changed. And they offered me this position. I should mention that there were very few synagogues, I don't think there were any, that offered at that time shuls that had mechitza. Because all the congregations that were just emerging were in the process of changing to conservative. And therefore, to take a position that had a mechitza, you could not find. So my chavrusa went to Bangor, Maine, because there he found a shul with a mechitza, and I decided to come to Hamilton. So when I came to Hamilton, since I had the shochet on my side, and he was a ben Torah, he knew how to learn, and that whole group of the peddlers, since he declared that I was a Talmid Chacham, those were his words, then everything changed. And when I would come into shul, they'd all rise. These are the old timers.
What was the shochet's name?
Grenick. And the next Shabbos, 3 elders of the Beth Jacob synagogue joined us. One was Rosenfeld, he had a little Spitzberdel, and there was Isaac Levy and Uwe Pakin. These were the 3 big people, I was told, of the Beth Jacob. Now the reason why they came to our shul on Cannon Street was, first of all, Rabbi Simon spoke only in English.
Rabbi Simon was
the rabbi of the Beth Jacob.
Okay.
And he spoke in English and did not relate at all to the old timers who spoke in Yiddish. In fact, there was great friction. There was such friction that there was almost fistfights. So that constituent, very small, would come Friday night, Shabbos morning, and Shalashudas. They'd come to Addis Israel, and Matzoi Shabbos, they'd have their cars, so they would take me home because I lived on James Street, south, the Mountain Manor, I think Mountain something apartments. It was a long schlep. Be that as it may. And And at that time, the major personality in our community was Max Hoffman of Alav Shalom, and he was the driving force. And I would report to him after the minyan. The minyan was at 7. I report to him about 7:30 and say, what is your schedule for today? And I learned a lot from him.
This is the morning minyan.
He didn't come to the minyan, but I'm saying at the morning minyan after 7, 7:30, 7:45,
That's right.
he was the one I would report to, who I'm going to see, what I'm going to do. And I did not feel that he was concerned only with power. He was really concerned with building a congregation and a synagogue. And his sincerity and ability was very impressive. So I considered him my mentor, and the relationship was very good. And then he said to me, well, we have to borrow $500,000. So I said to him, well, how should we go about it? Well, he was not in a position, or did not really feel that he wanted to sign in the bank for $500,000. $500,000 is today like $5 or $10 million. I mean, from 58 until now, I was earning only $6,000 a year and paying $200 a month rent. So you have to understand it was a difficult time. So I decided to go to the bank manager. And the bank manager, Mr. Amy, he was Episcopalian.
The Royal Bank.
The Royal Bank. I went to the Royal Bank, and I don't think it was his bank. I don't think it was Max Hoffman's bank. I'm not sure. So I went to the Royal Bank, and I saw Mr. Amy, and I said, Mr. Amy, we want to borrow $500,000. So he looks at me now. He was about 6 feet tall, very impressive, distinguished individual. And I weighed 124 pounds. And why do I say that? Because when I was introduced Friday night by Mr. Henry Katz, he had a resume from Yeshiva University, and it said my height, 5'6", 5'6 and a half, weighing 124 pounds. That's how I was introduced. Be that as it may, I went to see Mr. Amy, and he asked me what type of a synagogue I want to build. And I muttered something, and he said, excuse me? So I had to spurt out the Orthodox. So he put his head on his hand, and there was a dead silence for about 30 seconds, which I thought was who knows how long. And he says, all right, I'll help you. So I said, Mr. Amy, why would you want to help me? He says, well, I was raised in Timmins. My father died and left my mother with 5 little children. And at that time, we were destitute. So there was an Orthodox Jew who owned a general store. He called in my mother, and he said, as long as I have the store, you will have food and clothes for them to wear. And I thought that was the first miracle in my career, because it was beyond human comprehension. Immediately I ran to Max. I said to Max, he said, he'll help us. And I didn't want to go further with that. I said, thank you very much, Mr. Amy, and I left. He says, go down and see him again. So I went down to see him again, and he said to me, of course, who was prepared to sign? So I went back to Mr. Hoffman. I said, well, we need signatures. He says, well, we can get signatures, $500, $1,000, get the whole congregation to, we had 75 families at the time. So fine, you sign 1,000, whatever, we'll have signatures, we'll manage. And Mr. Amy asked me, how do you intend to pay back? I said, I don't know, but I'm certain we'll pay everything back. He says, don't you have a men's club? I said, certainly we have a men's club. That means it was born at that meeting. And we established a men's club. He says, how much do you think they can raise over 5 years? Oh, I said, at least $25,000 to $50,000 a year. So he put down 250. He says, what, a ladies' auxiliary? Certainly. Well, the Salvatores went there. But we needed a major. He wanted to see, he says, are the Goldblatts members of your congregation? I said, no. He mentioned Barnett's, these are the people, Leo Barnett at the time. I said, no. And every time he mentioned a name, I came up empty-handed. So I went back to Max. I said, Max, he wants a very important person to sign here. He says, well, you come from Montreal, don't you know Mr. Bronfman? I said, do I know Mr. Bronfman? Anyways, I did my homework and I asked who would be more my team, who would be more sympathetic to this, whether it was Sam or Alan. So I was informed that Alan was the intellectual. He was involved with the Hebrew University, as you know. So I called Mr. Alan Bronfman. I said, Mr. Bronfman, you know, I'm a Montrealer. And you are the godfather of Montreal. That's how we were raised. When a Jew had a problem, we'd go to Alan Bronfman. He says, what can I do for you? I say, I'm trying to establish an Orthodox shul, and we have to borrow $500,000. I would like you to arrange that loan. So I hear a laughter of ha-ha, and he says, how do you intend to pay? I said, God will reward us. We're doing mitzvahs. He says, all right, we'll think about it. So I felt that that conversation did not lead to much. And about 3 weeks later, Sylvia calls and looks for me, and she says, there's a Bronfman looking for you. So I called Mr. Bronfman. I said, yes. Immediately I got through from the Seder to Rabbi Green, Hamilton, got through to Alan Bronfman. And I said to him, what do you think? He says, put it through regular channels. You got a favorable report from the bank manager. So that was the second miracle. Amy and Alan Bronfman putting in a word was enough to give us $500,000. And for 2 years, I spoke only in Yiddish. People who I met every day, the Minyan, were only peddlers in the scrap business who would go feed their horses before the Minyan. But I knew these people very well because my father, Rabbi Shalom, was the president of the Ojriver Shul, although we were not from Poland.
In Montreal? In
Montreal. We were not from Poland, but I was raised in a Yiddish-speaking home. And my father, Rabbi Shalom, was the president of that Polish group because his best friend, Shlomo Birnbaum, Rabbi Shalom, was a Ben Torah man who was a literary individual. And he was the kvater, you know, at my bris with his wife. And so I heard about the names, the Wachsmans and the Rochbergs. These were names. And on tape we will leave that concept a little in abeyance because it was not something that would encourage building an Orthodox community. But I found that the respect that they had for a Rav coming from Ojriv was a very important thing. And the Ojrivers recognized that in me, and I don't know why, but be that as it may, I was the Rav. Although there was a Rav Lichtiker who was older than I was, but he was a Lithuanian who came after the war. But his relationship wasn't that great. But with me, they accepted me and respected me to the fullest. I never had a moment that these people in any way would say anything that would be pogea covered. And that was very important.
And the shul, Rabbi Green, is built in what year?
I came at 58,
yeah.
In July 58. We started building in July 59, or just, and it was completed in 61.
The first bar mitzvah in this shul is Helen Yellen's son.
That's, I don't remember, but.
Yeah, that's what she remembers. So, 61, and you probably do remember that.
But before we come, I think it's
Yeah.
important, before we come to the shul,
Sure.
so here we have now the setting, and nonetheless, there's a loan of $500,000. That was not a gift. So of course we had a big dedication, and before the dedication. So we're involved with this loan, and we had no mikveh in Hamilton. And living in a community that there's no mikveh is a major problem. I was in New York at the time. They'd asked me how it was, I was telling them what is happening in a couple of miracles, but we didn't have the shul yet. But we had rights to $500,000 for a loan, and I needed to build a mikveh. So the Subal Korov says to me, he says, "Fahr zurück, it's will sein Geld für euch. Go back to Hamilton, there'll be money for you." Well, when I came back to Hamilton, there was a Jew by the name of Harry Siegel. He lived on Ray Street, literally a hovel. And there he is sitting on the steps of the shul, on the Cannon Street. And as soon as I arrive, he gets up and he says, I should take him home. So I took him home, and he says to me, he had a cholam, and a yid like Vasabod with a long white beard, revealed himself to him and said that if he wants to live, he should give me money. Now you have to understand, I'm shocked. So he goes he finds a shafer there, what do you call a shafer?
Yeah, a cupboard.
A cupboard, and he takes out a garbage bag, and he starts counting ones and twos. Well, I get frightened, because if he can have a dream that he should give me money, the next day he can have a nightmare. And here I would take the money, and that would be a major problem. So I said, I need witnesses. So I ran down to York Street, and I called Max and Harold Bornstein. I said, you got to come, got to count money. And we counted $4,000. That was a major contribution. And don't forget, we're just dabbling and getting plans for the shul and everything else. But I want to do that, buy a mikveh and build a mikveh. That's also important to me. So I'm back in New York talking to the same Suvakarov. I said, I can't build with $4,000. He says, go back and there'll be more money. So I came back to Hamilton. Once again, the same scenario. The same Harry Siegel sits in front of the shul waiting for me. That's what he do every day. Till I came back, must have been away for a week or 10 days. Every day he'd wait for me to come. Finally I came, he says, he had the same dream, and I have to give me more money. Once again, I go get the two witnesses, we start counting money. And we count $15,000. With the $20,000, I built a mikveh.
Excuse me, Rabbi, I find it hard to believe that there was no mikveh in Hamilton up until this point.
Well, you see, there was a mikveh in Hamilton in the time of Rav Levine, and he closed it down, or they closed it down, I don't know.
When he left, or what?
I don't know, because whatever reasons there were, so it's closed down. And then I'm told that by Mr. Pollock, there's a Pollock, George Pollock, that I should go see the Goldblatts. But they have money for the mikveh, because the mikveh was sold, and Rav Levine said if they're going to build another mikveh, that money will be available. So I go run and try to get the money. Well, I went to Frank, Olav Shalom. He said doesn't know anything about it. And I'm sure he didn't, These were, no way should it be interpreted in any negative way, because these were very charitable people. You should understand this Hamilton community. The Goldblatts were the people who that was the Jewish agency with Jacob Goldblatt. And when a person would come to Hamilton, he'd get a horse and a wagon. I mean, they provided, that was the Jewish agency. And for every cause, whether Israel, locally, fine. So I didn't get any help there. So that's how we built the mikveh from Mr. Siegel. Fine. And of course, that was not enough. So I went to Toronto. We raised a number of people who contributed another $4,000 or $5,000, and that's how the mikveh came into being. So we built the mikveh, and we build in the process of building the shul. But before we build the shul, there's an interesting story. We come to the big meeting, and there's a big debate. What chutzpah we have to build a shul like this when we haven't got the membership nor the money. So a man by the name Mr. Poulter, Olav Hashalom, he gets up and he says, Rebbe, I pledge $1,000. $50 this year, $50 next year, and if God gives me 20 years, you'll get your $1,000. Rebbe, for my $1,000, you're not building enough. For me, you won't get any more money. So what are you people talking about? His name, the Goyse Tzeleges. These are people that are giving you advice. If you want to build with Max, build. We have nothing to do with this. Or no, they want us to build, just the opposite. They want us to build. But that was the mood of the time.